We're thinking this morning briefly about blessing and cursing. I read on Facebook this week these words. Somebody said, sometimes the thoughts in my head get bored, so they go out for a stroll through my mouth. This is rarely a good thing. Anyone know that feeling for themselves? And you're still talking, aren't you? Thinking, why am I still going? I should have shut this down sentences ago. We continue to think about what it means to be a mature follower of Jesus today. And our Bible reading is James 3, verse 10. James, Martin Luther said James is a right strawy epistle hundreds of years ago. He said it's a really difficult book because I think it's so blunt in places. And in it he writes these words, out of the same mouth come praise. That Greek word for praise can be good speaking, fair speaking, blessing, praise, celebration, a gift. Oh, I like that last one, a gift. That your words, my words, can be a gift to someone else as they come out of our mouths, that they can lift that person. Have you ever seen someone's eyes brighten up when you give them a physical gift? Oh, thank you for me. And our words can be that kind of gift. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing, condemnation, doom. That's what the Greek word means there. There's no positive spin on that, is there? It is not a good phrase. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. I struggle with this. Do you? The mouth should be used for praise of God and encouragement and love and kindness to other people. But I struggle with it. Ralph Martin, in his commentary on this passage, says, like Jesus in Matthew's Gospel, James understands a person's speech to be a barometer of spirituality. It is as though one's speech cannot hide but must express what is in one's heart. How do I feel when I curse other people? I feel pathetic and petty. When I've had that conversation where I've slagged someone else off to someone, I'm thinking, I want to go back and correct that because I know that that was not the right thing to say, but now I've said it. If I go back, I'm going to look an even bigger idiot. But God tells me to humble myself and then I'll be exalted. So I should go back and tell them. But if I go back and tell them that what I said was really horrible, they're going to realise what a really horrible person I am. So what do I do? And then for the rest of the day, if I don't go back and say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that, I just feel cruddy. Because I know I've said things I shouldn't have done. How do I feel when I bless others? I feel like God. Because God blesses people. Right from the beginning of the Bible, God is about blessing. In creation with Adam and Eve. In Genesis 12 with Abraham, you will be a great nation and you are to bless other nations. All the way through, Jesus tells us, bless, bless, bless. So when I bless other people, when I give them a verbal gift, I feel good. I don't do it to feel good. That's just the upshot of it. But to say to somebody, that meal was great, thank you. Try that this lunchtime, or maybe wait till Monday so they know you're not doing it just because I said to do it today. Give them a day's grace. But just pick out something really specific in the meal they've made and say, the herbs you used there have really lifted that aubergine. It's fantastic. Go and find aubergines. Sainsbury's tomorrow will be like, aubergines are going off the shelves like anything. We need to get more in, and then none of us will buy them ever again. Jesus places a very high calling on our mouths. Have you noticed how Jesus always upgrades the Old Testament teachings? You have heard it said, but I say to you. Jesus takes these familiar biblical teachings and he just pushes them a little bit further. He says this in Luke 6, 27 and 28. But to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. How do we bless more than curse? I think Jesus at his baptism holds a key for me, for us. At Jesus' baptism with John the Baptist, he hears the voice of his heavenly Father amongst the clanging cymbals of the crowds. Jesus hears the still small voice of God in his heart and his soul. The crowds can't quite make out, according to some of the gospel stories, what is actually going on. But Jesus hears it clearly. This is my son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Jesus hears that at the start of his 3 years of ministry. Whatever anyone else says about me, he hangs out with prostitutes and tax collectors and sinners. Yeah, I do, but I am loved by my heavenly Father. He hears the still, small voice. And we need to hear that gentle voice of God in the midst of the clanging cymbals of war and aggravation and discussion, so that we bless more than curse. Every morning before you get up, I encourage you, just stay in bed for 10 seconds and just say, I am loved by God. Thank you. And today I am going to bless instead of curse. If we do this, if we hear this gentle voice of God, I believe our hearts become warmer and our words become kinder. One priest, Ronald Rolheiser, said, we are mature when we define ourselves by what we are for rather than what we are against. The capacity to praise more than to criticise defines maturity. The crowning glory of maturity and discipleship is the capacity and willingness to bless others, particularly the young. The ultimate picture of maturity and generosity is not that of a warrior or a martyr dying for a cause, noble as that may be. Ultimate maturity is seen in the picture of a blessing elder, a grandmother, a grandfather, a parent, a teacher, a coach, a mentor, or anyone else with power and authority, standing before the life and energy of the young, and like the Creator at the original creation, and like the Father at the baptism of Jesus, basking in that energy and saying, it is good, it is very good, in you I take delight. I preached in this church at the age of 16 in the pulpit over there on a Sunday evening about Rahab the prostitute and Jericho. Anyone remember the sermon? Well, I'm shocked. You have encouraged me for decades since that point to keep going. You have blessed me with your words. More ministers are leaving ministry now in Baptist Union than are joining. More are leaving because they're burnt out than moving to another church. There is a crisis in the Baptist churches, one could say. Can some of that come down to, not completely, but can some of it come down to cursing rather than blessing? It's really easy to bless, to see the positive in someone and to encourage them. Hildegard of Bingen was a German saint. She was an older lady. In the Women's Quarterly, Charlotte Allen says, this nun was one tough sister. Still in Germany now, 3% of the population use the natural medicines that she recommended in the 1100s rather than going to their GP. And towards the end of her life, in the last year of her life, she buried a man in their convent's graveyard at Rupertsberg. And the clergy from the German town of Mainz argued that he should not have been buried there because he had been excommunicated because he was possibly a heretic. It's interesting how the word heretic has changed over church history, isn't it? Heretic early on meant you're just drifting slightly from the truth. Do you want to come back? Now, heretic is heretic, you're out. It was a bit like that in her day and age, very black and white. And the priest said to her, you need to dig him up and he needs to be put in a pauper's grave. He cannot be laid to rest in this consecrated ground. It is wrong. And Hildegard of Bingen at the age of 80 said, no, we're not digging him up. And one story says that she and her nuns went round the graveyard and scraped all the names and dates off of every gravestone so that if these priests came to try and dig them up themselves, they wouldn't know which grave to dig up. Can you imagine an 80-year-old German nun bent over, scraping because she so believed that this man should be able to be buried in dignity. For a year, she and her nuns were not allowed to pray the divine office or to celebrate mass communion at all. That's the only reason people went to these convents. That's the only way they would get money to keep them going. And she said, no, we will stand for this man. And if it means we fall apart and we don't have anything, then that's what will happen. And it wasn't until she was 81, 6 months before she died, that the Archbishop of that area relented and said, okay, you can start praying again. You can start serving communion again. And that man was never dug up because Hildegard of Bingen refused to curse. Even in his death, she blessed. Let's watch Doctor Who as he meets Vincent van Gogh. What a link there. He was not a perfect man by any stretch of the imagination, but he lived a life of curse. Cursed by his parents, I believe, who named him after his older brother, who died 1 year exactly to the day before him, so that every day he went to church where his father was the priest, he would see his year-older son's stone there before him. How would that shape you? Cursed by his dad in an argument on Christmas Day after the church service when he was thrown out of the family home and told not to come back. Wanted to be an evangelist to the Belgian miners and was cursed by the leaders when they came to see him after 6 months, and they said to him, what are you doing? You look like the miners. You are covered in coal. You have chosen the poorest house to sleep in. You've given your bed away to a child that had an illness. This is wrong. You are a priest. You should be higher than this. You are out. Cursed by the other artists of his time who said, tone down your colours, make it look more realistic, Vincent. You're never going to do anything in this life. Cursed by the children who, as he painted in the fields outside Arles in southern France, would throw stones at the paintings and try and rip them up. Cursed by Gauguin, who came and stayed with him for 9 weeks. And when he cut his ear off, what did Gauguin do? Got on a train and went straight to Paris and said, I'm not coming back. Cursed when he came out of the asylum 3 weeks later, back to the yellow house where he lived, and not one person in the town had cleaned it up at all, and he was greeted by the dry blood from his stunted ear on the floor up the stairs and in his bedroom. Cursed by the people of that town who signed a letter to the town mayor saying, we want this mad red fox to be cast out of this place. Cursed in the asylum by the priest who sat with him and tried to prove that, does God really love you? Because you're eating paint and you shouldn't be doing that. Cursed in his death in northern France in a tiny village as he was laid out on a table, and the priest of the village said, I will not come and do his funeral. I'm moved by that clip because I think, what if he'd heard those words of blessing in his lifetime? Would he have not died in his late 30s and gone on to share his wisdom and his brilliance with others? Joe and I went to Arles, where he spent most of the last period of his life for 4 days, and we walked around and looked at all the places where he had painted. It was hotter than this and we sweated, and we went past a little antique shop, and I saw in there a tiny postcard, and I went in and I bought it. And I don't know if it's fake or it's real, but I have a collection of over 40 books about Van Gogh and his spirituality and his Christian faith. I have everything I can find because I find the chap fascinating. But this is my treasured possession. Because in this picture, he looks happy. He looks blessed. He has a good day in the field painting, and someone has said, can I just take your photo? Yeah, why not? We were at my sister's 50th birthday celebration last Saturday evening. That's me. It was a country and western theme. This shirt has been washed, by the way, since then. I was the only man to do line dancing All the women did line dancing, all the men sat around the edge coaching me on what I should do and what I was doing wrong. And I wanted to say that I was going to bless rather than curse. Why don't you jolly well get up and do it with me? I was sat with two daughters of one of my sister's friends. They're in their mid and late 20s, and we were chatting away, and one of them said to me, "Can we go to church?" I said, "Yeah, of course you can." She said, "Do we have to go every week? If we only went occasionally, would we still be able to go?" I said, "Yeah, of course you could." And my daughter Megan said, "But the more you go, the better it is for you." So we'd be welcomed at church then. I said, "Yeah, check out a website of a church and go along to one near you." And my prayer, as they do that at some point over this summer period, is that they enter a church that is drenched with mature Christians who will not curse them, but will bless them and will welcome them.